Now, the overwhelming majority of movies want to give audiences a likable, sympathetic hero that they can easily root for all the way to the finish line. After all, it's a crowd-pleasing formula that clearly works. Yet not all filmmakers are quite so eager to cling to cinematic convention, and sometimes they want to challenge viewers by making them think about exactly who they're cheering on. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 movies that wanted you to hate the hero. Number 10. Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. If the marketing for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World painted Michael Cera's title character as an easily affable slacker musician fending off his new girlfriend's evil exes, the reality of this movie proper is actually quite different. Basically, Scott Pilgrim is an asshole, and Edgar Wright pulls no punches with this throughout the film. Even if you're fine with a 22-year-old Scott dating a 17-year-old high schooler, and there's the fact that Scott then cheats on Knives with Ramona Flowers. Beyond that, he refuses to accept his myriad personal flaws and displays a patent lack of respect for both others, even his own bandmates and himself. But to be clear, this isn't a narrative failing in any way. The entire point of Scott's character arc throughout the movie is that he's a lazy, narcissistic, air quotes, nice guy who comes to appreciate the errors of his ways and begins a journey of self-improvement. Yet of course, that doesn't mean that we immediately forgive or forget what he's done, and so audiences may leave the movie still feeling pretty iffy about Scott. Number 9. Patrick KENZIE, Gone Baby Gone. Ben Affleck's terrific thriller Gone Baby Gone stars Casey Affleck as Boston PI Patrick KENZIE, and for the overwhelming majority of the movie, we're absolutely on his side. His methods whilst investigating the disappearance of young Amanda McCready may not always be above board, but it isn't difficult to root for him throughout. That is, at least until late in the movie, where he finds Amanda alive and well, having been kidnapped by Captain Jack Doyle, who feels that he can give her a better life than her neglectful mother. At this point, Patrick is faced with a dilemma: pretend he saw nothing and let Amanda grow up with Doyle, or call the cops and have her returned to her wildly irresponsible mother. And though Patrick's girlfriend Angie assures him she'll hate him if he calls the cops, that's exactly what he does. The film ends with Amanda returned to her mother whilst Doyle is arrested. Angie breaks up with Patrick, and in the final scene, Patrick pays a visit to Amanda and realizes that her mother has gone back to neglecting her. Now, while you can argue that Patrick made the right decision in the eyes of the law, morally speaking, it's much tougher to sanction his actions. It's a brilliantly infuriating moral dilemma that's firmly divided audiences ever since the film's release. But even if you think Patrick did the right thing, you probably hate him at least a little bit for it, right? Number 8. Nick Dunne, Gone Girl. On paper, Gone Girl's Nick Dunne might sound like an easy-to-root-for hero, given that he's wrongly accused of his wife Amy's disappearance. As it turns out, Amy framed Nick for her own murder, and so in theory, we shouldn't struggle to cheer Nick on as he uncovers his wife's deception and brings her to justice, right? Except, as much as he was wronged, it's tough to deny that Nick isn't an asshole in his own right. For starters, he cheats on Amy with a much younger woman, and to make it even ickier, she is one of his students. While not the worst thing in the world, it is not great by any stretch, and inadvertently sets in motion Amy's subsequent frame-up once she learns what he's up to. Yet there's one major moment that left audiences screaming at the screen, calling Nick an irredeemable idiot, and that's at the end of the movie, where Amy stages her return from being kidnapped and announces to Nick that she's pregnant with his child, having used sperm that he stored at a fertility clinic. Nick reluctantly agrees to stay with Amy in order to be there for his unborn baby, much to the frustration of both the viewers and his sister Margot. Though Nick should be a relatively sympathetic character in theory, he so thoroughly dooms himself through his own actions that one might end up hating him only marginally less than, his murderous schemer of a wife. Number 7. Tony Stark, Iron Man. The entire plot of the original Iron Man is that Tony Stark is presented as a smug, self-centered sleazeball who profits off of war, only for his subsequent experiences to forever change his path. As undeniably charming as Downey is in the role, Stark also starts out the movie as an arrogant, casually sexist, ultra-wealthy blowhard who makes money from misery and is only humbled when he very nearly loses his life. Tony, of course, becomes much more of a likable hero once he adopts the Iron Man persona and grows considerably over the course of his subsequent MCU appearances, but make no mistake, he is a legendary dickhead from the outset. One suspects the caustic Tony Stark of 2008 wouldn't fly in the present climate were he introduced today, as Black Panther co-writer Joe Robert Cole certainly agreed with. Think back to Tony Stark, him being douchey and being okay. If that character, Stark, was created in a movie today, I wonder if the response would be like, oh, it's cool that he's douchey and disrespectful to women, that's fine. I think we're in a different place, and I think it's a better place. Number 6. Nick Rice, Law-Abiding Citizen. Now, in fairness, Law-Abiding Citizen is a film that absolutely blurs the line between hero and villain. Even so, the hero of the piece is prosecutor Nick Rice, who ends up invoking the wrath of Clyde Shelton after Shelton's wife and daughter are murdered, and Rice makes a soft deal with one of the killers in order to maintain his high conviction rate. Ultimately, the film ends with Nick prevailing over bloodthirsty vigilante Clyde by blowing him up with his own bomb. Yet ever since the movie's 2009 release, viewers have noted an unwavering disdain for Rice. Though by moving the bomb from City Hall to Shelton's own prison cell, Rice objectively saves a number of lives and brings Shelton's killing spree to an end, he still is an unsympathetic instrument of a legal system in dire need of reform. As a result, many found themselves spending most of the movie rooting for Shelton instead, who, while undeniably going too far in his quest for vengeance, was at least raging against a profoundly rigged pillar of American life. Even though Rice is clearly supposed to be an unlikable, self-serving tool for the bulk of the film, a lot of people wish the film had ended with Shelton, the supposed villain, actually prevailing. Instead, Rice kills Shelton and pieces his fraught family life back together, despite nobody watching really giving much of a damn about him. Number 5. Ronnie Barnhart, Observe and Report. Now, we're using the term hero pretty loosely here, given that black comedy Observe and Report is basically the darkest timeline version of Paul Blart Mall Cop. Seth Rogen plays Ronnie Barnhart, a mentally ill mall cop who attempts to apprehend a serial flasher terrorizing the mall where he works. The marketing presented Ronnie as a well-intended, relatively good-natured weirdo, with Rogen's casting perfectly playing into this. Yet in actuality, Ronnie is a horrible human being. It's made painfully clear throughout the movie that Ronnie has a hero complex, and viewed through the lens of 2022, it's impossible to watch Jodie Hill's film as anything less than an ahead-of-its-time attack on American policing. But what truly elevates Ronnie from off-putting oddball to genuinely detestable? Well, first off, there's the deeply uncomfortable scene in which he date rapes his love interest, and when he finally captures the flasher at film's end, he only does so by shooting him in the shoulder. While the latter moment is a triumphant one in Ronnie's own mind, to us, it's a grossly disproportionate display of force that confirms the danger of so-called good guys with guns. The film's caustic sensibilities did not go down too well with critics or audiences back in 2009, but over a decade later, it kind of feels due for a re-evaluation from both. Number 4. Basically everybody. Bodies, bodies, bodies. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is an amusing Gen Z riff on the typical "and then there were none" formula, where a group of 20-somethings find themselves being picked off by a shadowy murderer. The entire conceit of the movie is that we as the audience have no idea who the hero or final girl is actually going to be, and at the end we learn the most unexpected of answers: it's both everybody and nobody at the same time. As it turns out, there wasn't actually a killer at all. The first person to die, David, accidentally killed himself by slashing his own throat while trying to open a wine bottle with a machete for a TikTok video. The result of the night's events are fueled by nothing more than fear, paranoia, and a ton of drugs, as the remaining youngsters start getting one another killed. But it's B who most obviously fits the final girl mold, given that she's the group's outsider. Unlike the wealthy girls around her, she's poor and is forced to take care of her mentally ill mother. Yet even she, the most signposted of heroes, ends up succumbing to the group's hysteria and killing 2 people. Though B ultimately survives along with her girlfriend Sophie, it's safe to say that she ended up becoming just as detestable as the vapid, privileged girls in her midst. Basically, everybody sucks, and true heroism is hard to come by in this movie, which satirizes Gen Z's worst instincts with a sure spikiness. Number 3. Jack Cates, 48 Hours. 48 Hours is a movie that probably couldn't get made today, or at least not with the same through line. That's because its focal hero, in this case, and I use air quotations around that, San Francisco Police Inspector Jack Cates, is such a card-carrying piece of human garbage. I mean, where to begin? Cates is blatantly power-drunk as a cop who will bend the law to make his life easier wherever possible, and shortly after reluctantly teaming with criminal Reggie Hammond, starts making racist comments like his life depends on it. He's a prototypical example of the loose cannon cop, plot prominently featured in action and crime movies throughout the 1970s and 1980s. And really the only reason Cates isn't a complete lost cause is that he's paired with an entertaining black foil who can bring him down to earth. Though Cates does apologize to Reggie for his remarks later in the film, Reggie crucially doesn't let him all the way off the hook, retorting, "Doing your job don't explain everything, Jack." It's this buddy cop dynamic between Jack and Reggie which makes the film work, no matter that by any metric, and especially contemporary scrutiny, that Jack is a deeply awful person. Number 2. Annie, Dashcam. Dashcam is one of the most provocative horror films of recent times due to director Rob Savage's decision to saddle audiences with a fiercely unlikable protagonist who he effectively dares us to root for. Annie is a right-wing live streamer who, beyond simply having an obnoxiously grating and overbearing personality, also makes it clear that she doesn't care much for COVID restrictions, homeless people, or really anything that causes her even a mild inconvenience. She's an anti-vax, anti-mask, MAGA-loving conspiracy theorist who causes major headaches for basically everybody that she comes into contact with, in turn making the situation worse at basically every opportunity. Though the film received praise for Savage's technical execution, critics and audiences were sharply divided on Annie, with many deeming her too detestable to care for, in turn undermining her status as our hero. But that was very clearly by design on Savage's part, to test whether he could put an utter scumbag through enough hell that we even cheered her on regardless. Unsurprisingly, the results varied wildly. And number 1, Nick, Den of Thieves. In the morally soupy world of Den of Thieves, it's tough to figure out who would pass as a genuine hero, because neither the focal cops nor the thieves are actually morally upstanding people at all. Yet it's Detective Nick who is surely the closest thing that we've got to a traditional action movie hero, but he behaves so deplorably that audiences are likely to want to have a shower after spending 2 hours plus with him. For starters, Nick is a flagrantly corrupt cop who shoots perps first and asks questions later. Beyond that, he's a tornado of toxic masculinity and an absolute train wreck of a human being. An alcoholic with a fractured family life who thinks nothing of eating a donut that he finds at a grisly crime scene. Butler plays the part with such hammy glee that we're almost persuaded to root for him as he attempts to stop Merriman's heist at the Federal Reserve. Yet he's such a shameless degenerate that you're more likely to pull for the thieves instead. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 movies that wanted you to hate the hero. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Twitter at RetroJ, but the O is a 0, or Instagram, where it's the same handle. Hope to see you over there. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Even though we spoke today a lot about heroes that we pretty much detested, you, my friend, listening to this video are a hero, and I love you for it. I hope you're treating yourself well with love and respect, because you deserve all the best things in life, alright? And do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise. You're a massive ledge, and go out there and absolutely smash it today. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.